Hi, welcome to Healing Humanity. Let's talk about treading lightly. And I'm talking about blunt warnings between genders that occur even in 2026. There's a lot of women that are out here that have had great mentors and nothing has been cautioned or forewarned, or, maybe perhaps they didn't take it personal. But I sometimes do. Because of the history that I've had, I do take it a little personal when someone presumes that I would need to tread lightly with a male counterpart in my field because they are married. Here's the problem: women are not supportive enough of other women. That's number one. And I think the second part is that men, when they say things like this, and what I'm talking about is a situation that occurred just recently, and I was looking, to talk to somebody about something that I wanted to do, and he said, well, find a woman that has done what you want to do and have her be your mentor. And I said, well, there isn't a woman that has done what I wanted to do in this area that I could talk to. He said, well, find a man, and he named a one that might be, but then he followed it up immediately with tread lightly. And my instant response in my mind was, I'm not interested in his male genitalia. I'm interested in his brain. So why would I need to tread lightly? That was my instant response in my brain. I did not say that out loud. But in my walk, in my career, I have heard, don't wear heels because you're going to attract the wrong attention. Women aren't going to like that if you wear high heels to the office. Or the wives aren't going to like that. And that was in an office setting. In a bar setting, I was told, you need to speak to the woman first so she's not going to get jealous of you talking or taking an order from her husband. I've heard dial it back. I have heard you should probably back off. Even though I'm simply just having a conversation. Other women have heard, don't come on too strong, or he's married, and I remember this one event that I was in online, and this man made it a strong point, and of course the ring was on the ring finger, but made it a strong point to make it aware that he was married. Like there was anything that I had said or done anything that made him think that I was interested in his genitalia rather than his brain. I was so angry at that. I'm still angry about that particular moment. We're constantly being told, be careful how you interact with them. We are, we have to avoid being alone with people. But the thing is that what I've noticed is that there's always a third person. Like if you're going to meet with someone of the opposite sex, absolutely you want to have somebody else around, or keep the door open or whatever. But it seems to be that it happens sort of under the radar, or they think it's under the radar, and it's not. You don't have that third person in the building when you're meeting with a man and a man. And it's disheartening as a woman, as someone who's doesn't have ulterior motives, does not care about having a relationship with the person that she's talking to, me being specifically, simply wants information, wants guidance, wants a mentor, wants someone who can just be real and not in themselves have ulterior motives or think that way in any way, shape, or form, whether it's a church setting, whether it's on the street corner, whether it's bad terminology, but on the street, or in business. And I've seen it straight across the board with so many other women. And I remember a time when I was growing up where women were starting to go into the workforce even more than they had, because divorce started to become like a huge thing. It became more prevalent in the late 70s, early 80s, and women started to go back to work, or started to go to work even more, and in droves. And in fact, so much so that men had to consider how they were going to allow women to go to the bathroom. There wasn't these men and women bathroom stalls at that time. So when I see these things, and I hear these presumptive gender cautions, it it hardens my heart, because it makes me think that I shouldn't approach someone, or I need to be very cautious in how I approach them. And that shouldn't be. I mean, we're all human beings. I think we need to reframe these warnings somehow and make it more appropriate. Where instead of making it an appearance of evil, right, out of the gate, we need to alleviate that altogether. It really matters the context and the like the whole intent behind the interactions between people. And these cautions that I shared with you are both male to male, in potential interactions with the opposite sex, female to female in potential interactions with an opposite gender. And so it's not just men and women talking to each other. It's something that has become a norm for us, that really does not sit well. Not with me, anyway. Maybe other people can overlook it, but I have seen so much discrimination in my journey and in my walk. I was in a male-dominated industry, a couple of them, and I had to fight a lot. Had to overlook a lot of just poor choice of words, let's say. What if we all approached, two opposite genders, married or not, if we approached that in a more neutral stance, to be like assuming a good intent rather than a negative outcome, right? I mean, we talk about that in church, treat others the way you want to be treated, and love your neighbor as yourself. When we state these negatively presumptive cautions to people, that is not loving your neighbor as yourself. I don't think, anyway. You see, I wrote this down. I want to read this to you, because this is really how strongly I feel about it. Excuse me. I wrote, don't come on too strong, or be careful with him, because, or be careful, which can feel dismissive and stereotyping. And it implies that a woman's natural assertiveness or warmth, and most women are fairly warm, is inherently risky or suspicious. I mean, we've gone through enough years where we shouldn't have to worry about that anymore. Women have been in the workforce for quite a long time. We need to change the way that we approach these things and make it more positive. I mean, it's really defeating when you hear that, and it's delivered before any interaction has even occurred. Like the guy showing his wedding band, like I had any interest in him whatsoever, which I did not. It just was, it's a very, like I said, it's a very dismissive, nasty way to treat people in general. So what could the solution be? Well, I think like a neutral way to discuss something like that would be better, rather than accusatory at the onset, right? You can't just say, tread lightly to someone when they haven't done anything wrong, and not given any impression that they were intending to do anything wrong. It's not the way to treat people. I think a better approach is like to have some universal standards, some watch people observe their behavior, look at how they react with people, look at their intent. Have they shown intent where something like that might be a concern, or the way that they act might be a concern? Because if they haven't, then some sort of neutral policy has to be put into place in these businesses and in churches. You know, to use language like, in our environment, we keep all cross gender professional interactions in group settings, um, or with, open visibility, which means like outdoors or, in the congregation with others, something like that. Just to make it something that's upfront but not accusatory. Because people can see it, they sense it, they sense the difference in how one is treated than the other, and people see that. And if you we've got to get to a neutral stance on this, and to start treating people, to not put them in a frame of suspicion at the onset, and to emphasize like the clear professional boundaries that is expected, rather than don't be XYZ. I hope that makes sense. And then I think after you observe people, also, I think it's important that if you do see something, to bring it up. If you see something that makes you concerned about a person's behavior, there's nothing wrong with saying, look, you know what, I've kind of observed this, and I just want to have a conversation about, what I witnessed. And just quickly go over what you saw that might lead you into, or lead that person into a precarious or challenging situation in the future. I just think we need to model like a mutual accountability in this, and not just consider somebody as a true outsider, or as a troublemaker, when that is not their true intent whatsoever. So what can happen? I mean, I know that men and women have affairs. It happens all the time. I get that. I also get that women have wrongly accused men of bad behaviors. I also understand fully that men have denied bad behaviors that they actually did. It goes all ways. It's not a one-way street here. And so when we start to look at what needs to be done, I think that we need more training on emotional intelligence, on observant behavior rather than assumptive behavior. I think we need to do this in all organizations and in churches, for everyone. Our young men are learning some really bad behaviors right now, and I can't even imagine in another 10 years what life will be like between the two genders. It just seems like it's going in the wrong direction, and that needs to stop. And we're the ones that have to stop it. We're the generation right now that has the control to do something about it, to stop the way that things are going, and to change the narrative, and to change the interactions. And I think that emotional intelligence teachings would help tremendously. I think also teaching some form of better communication, like a nuanced communication, how to deal with these kinds of things in a more intellectual manner, rather than going back to the cave days where, we're all thinking with our groin rather than our head. And, and to assume a positive intent rather than maintaining these safeguards and putting up barriers for people that don't need to be there. If somebody's acting in a particular way, absolutely. But if they're not acting in a particular way that causes that sort of caution, they shouldn't be cautioned. They're human. I think also, to share in the humanity of it, to treat these interactions as professional collaborations, rather than, collaborations between two capable and intelligent adults, rather than a gender, patriarchal kind of interaction that is expected to result in something nefarious, which it's most of the time it's never going to be that. And then also, to encourage viability and transparency as, in public channels, in group meetings, open door policies, and just to make sure that that goes straight across both genders. To, when you only meet with a woman and keep the doors open, but when a man comes and you close the door, it gives off that feeling of distrust and just this patriarchal crap that we all need to get over. We need to move past this, because it undermines trust and it undermines talent of really potentially great people. So anyway, I just hope that in the future that we can focus on some of these things, like teaching the emotional intelligence and better gender relations, and support, like in with the faith in God, and faith with each other. We're supposed to treat each other with respect and with kindness and love and generosity, and it doesn't seem to be happening a whole lot. There seems to be still some deep-seated distrust and barriers that really need to be overcome. But on the other side of that, flip side of that, as women, when we're out here and we're looking for people to talk with, I think it is respectful to mind how you dress. I think it is respectful to to watch where the conversations go, and not allow the conversation to become too personal. If you're there for business, that it needs to stay there. It should not go into some form of personal narratives between the two of you. And then I also think that I said the way you dress, but I think also to include, like, if a gentleman is married, there's no harm in including the wife in the conversation that you might be having. She may have some interesting information to add, or see things that her husband doesn't see in his business endeavors that would be helpful to you. So I just would encourage you to open your mind a little bit, both sides, both men and women, and let's start to do a little bit better.